I would just call up to mind this notion of noble poverty.
Yeah.
It's the belief that there's virtue in not having money.
Mm.
And so, whenever we feel greed come up in us and we worry that, well, if I charge more, that would make me greedy. So greed is a signpost in ourselves that we're struggling with noble poverty, that we feel that there's somehow virtue in not having money. And yet, money is about energy. And so we're creating a very uneven relationship when we give and give and give, and we don't receive. We're overgivers, and it's not healthy to be an overgiver. It's not healthy to go into different levels of martyrdom and self-sacrifice. But do we feel ultimately that we deserve to receive?
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of the Love Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage.
Namaste. If you've been keeping your bank account and your spiritual practice in kind of separate boxes, you may want to rethink that strategy, especially after you listen to today's episode, because our guest is going to explain why treating money as part of your spiritual journey can actually transform both your business and your relationship with wealth. And I think anything we can do to enhance that is a good thing. So first, though, before I bring her on, because I know it's going to be amazing, I do want to welcome you to Live, Love, Engage, especially if this is your first time joining us. I am Gloria Grace, the founder of Align to Shine Academy, and I work with spiritually minded women entrepreneurs to break free from self-doubt so they can step into their highest potential. And part of that is going to be, owning our relationship with wealth. So let me tell you about today's guest. Her name is Mikelann Valterra, and she's an author, a speaker, a financial therapist, and master money coach. And I just got struck by that financial therapist. I'm going to ask her about that. That's an interesting way to look at things. We've had yoga therapists on the show before. Now, I don't think I've had a financial therapist. But anyway, she helps women rise above the money fog, transform their relationship with money, and design their ideal life. And I'm all about that. So let's bring her on now. And I want to welcome you, Mikelann, to Live, Love, Engage.
I am so happy to be here, Grace. Thank you. I love listening to your show. It's very fun to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think before I know I want to dive into like why money and spirituality are separate, but I really am intrigued because it's like I'd read your bio a couple times, but it was like for today, for whatever reason, I must be in that zone. Financial therapy. Why do you call yourself that?
Yeah, what is that?
What is that? Yeah.
Well, so I'll back up and put it in the context of money coaching. So I have been a money coach for 25 years, believe it or not, and which is a crazy amount of time, given that coaching has been around, maybe not a long time, and many people nowadays talk about money coaching. But I was one of the first in the country to get into money coaching. And so it used to be that people would see financial planner if they had questions on investments, maybe a credit counselor if they were struggling with debt, but the truth is, Grace, most of us have both. We want to build net worth. We don't want to go into credit card debt. And neither of those fields is particularly adept at the emotional side of money. And so, we need both. So money coaches absolutely look at, yes, how do you plan and track money, and how do you create a cash flow plan so that you feel totally in control of your money, and all these wonderful things that we may tiptoe around a little bit today, and few things are as emotional as money. Anyone says that money is not emotional, I think is a robot, right? So, financial therapy is looking at the emotional and psychological side of money and what is the impact of our relationship to money on our life. What is our personal money personality type? What are our motivations around money that impact what we do around money? And a lot of your listeners might be more familiar with the term money mindset, right? What is your money mindset, which is just a newer, more modern way of talking about your personal financial psychology. And what we think about money has a huge impact on what we do with money. It's not just about learn what to do. What we think and believe has a massive impact on our relationship to money. And it's going to come out in what we're talking about today, which is spirituality and money.
Yeah, it's this is a subject that really hits home with me. In fact, I was actually having a discussion with a friend not too long ago today about this, and it was sort of bringing up some stuff. Even though I've done a lot of work around this subject, there's always still layers to be unpacked, and still some beliefs and things that are under the surface. So we'll probably get to that in a little bit, but let's dive into why is it that we feel that money and spirituality, I guess, why are they separate? Maybe even why I think a lot of people feel that they really need to be separate.
Yeah, boy, that is such a great question, a great place to start. And it's also a complicated one, right? So many people I know, like my clients like yours, are very, very spiritually minded. And so sometimes there's this feeling of, is money going to taint the process, right? If I bring up money, does that hurt my ability to truly help people? And so that can be a piece of it, which would be, interesting to dig into. But I also think that for as much as people talk about holism and holistic being, we still treat money very, very separate. We do talk a lot about, mind and body and spirit versus matter. And we so want to live lives that are more connected and more holistic. But the reality is so many of us put money on the material side. And because we see money as so material and of this world, we think that anything having to do with money will hurt or taint or cause harm to the spiritual world. And yet, isn't it interesting, Grace? I mean, we give so much thought to our spiritual natures. Why do we want to separate money? We want our relationship to money to help us grow spiritually, but we tend to ignore it when it comes to anything having to do with looking at our spiritual lives.
Yeah, and we tend to forget, and this is something I've learned in working with actually different money coaches and things over the years, is that we call money currency, which is related to energy. So it's not really material as you're talking about, is it? It's really energy. So how can that help us to start to be able to reframe our relationship with money, if we can start really owning that possibility that money is just this energy tool that's out there?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, money, you're right. Money is energy, and we can do anything with money. And, it was interesting. I was talking to someone earlier today. Money makes you more of who you already are. So if you're a kind and wonderful, generous person and you win the lottery, you're going to become more generous. If you weren't a very nice person and you win the lottery, well, guess what? That's going to magnify that. So money can magnify who you already are. So it's not about the money. It's about, who am I? What are my values? And the more you dig into your relationship to money, the more you can start to ask, how can I use money to live out my values? How can I use money to support my spiritual practice in the world, right? And we can see it in a lot of different ways, but I'm a huge advocate for let's talk about it, because so many of us are in a money fog and we're not clear about money. And so we're not talking about living out according to our values when it comes to our spending. So we may see ourselves as very spiritual people, but we're unconscious in this huge other arena called money. And, we want to bring the beauty of spirituality into our pocketbook.
Yeah. And I love that, thinking of it as magnetizing who we already are. I like that, thinking about it, because I do know that especially, a lot of people a lot of small business owners who are in more of a spiritual profession, a lot of healers or massage therapists and things like that, they feel like they don't want to charge a lot of money because they want to be able to help everybody.
Right.
Forgetting sometimes to remember that they have bills to pay as well. And it's important to be able to, again, think of it as an energy exchange between people. So you have to be able to do that. So how can we start coming up with better ways to be able to shift these views around money that are really harming us more than they're helping us?
Boy, that's a good question. And I would even take it back one, because you just brought up a lot of really, really something really important. I would just call up to mind this notion of noble poverty, because you're describing some of the people that you help, and some of your listeners are probably tired of being caught in noble poverty, which, it's the belief that there's virtue in not having money. And so, whenever we feel greed come up in us and we worry that, well, if I charge more, that would make me greedy. If I do X, Y, and Z, that would make me greedy. So so greed is a signpost in ourselves that we're struggling with noble poverty, that we feel that there's somehow virtue in not having money. And yet, like you brought up, Grace, money is about energy. And so we're creating a very uneven relationship when we give and give and give, and we don't receive. And I call it the receiving valve, if you will, that we're giving and giving, but it's almost like the receiving valve gets stuck in one direction where we're overgivers, and I know all your listeners know this, but it's not healthy to be an overgiver. It's not healthy to go into different levels of martyrdom and self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
We know that. We would never recommend our family do that, our friends do that, our children do that, right?
Yeah.
But do we feel ultimately that we deserve to receive? And that's where all this gets really deep about, self-worth, which is not equaling net worth. That gets into its own little rabbit hole there. I mean, your self-worth is not dependent on money, and then, what you just asked, Grace, is, well, great. I bet all the listeners are going, yes, absolutely. I get it. What do you do? How do you start shifting?
Right. Because it's like you can know it up here in your head, but to get that message to your heart, I think is the really important thing, because I think there's a disconnect there, and because really our heart is where our emotions are, and frankly, this is this is really what we think by. It really is our heart, and they've even said we actually have seriously neurons and things in our heart, and it's really maybe our heart that's actually leading us more than we think our brain is. So so how can we do this?
Yeah. Oh, no, I love that. I was just thinking, I mean, this is a little bit off the topic, but I know when I started meditating through my heart as opposed to my head, it opened me up in a much deeper, more profound way, right? So it's like, how do we live through our heart, not just our head, while still honoring all parts of us? There's probably 10 different things, but a couple things that I would throw out is, I think it really helps people to get in touch with their money story. And what I mean by that is, what was money like for you when you were a kid growing up, and really getting clear that we're not these adults that sprang out of nowhere around money, now have all these feelings around money. We feel stressed and anxious sometimes about money, and we're in a money fog because of how we were raised. If we grew up, for example, hearing our parents fight about money, or we grew up in a family that didn't have enough money, it's important to talk about this and process this, like psychotherapeutically, really talk about our history around money, because it helps us understand why as adults we carry our current stress and anxiety. And it also helps to dissolve it when we see, where it came from. I would say that another really powerful practice is, I call it tuning and retuning your radar. And what I mean by that, Grace, is that when people have a lot of negativity around money, they tend to find stories in the news and people and examples that support a negative view around money. We're like, yep, I told you so. That person, of course, did this horrible, negative, evil. Like, of course, all these evil CEOs or all the different things. And so if you want to shift and retune your relationship with money, then I would challenge you to deliberately look for positive money role models. And one way to go about it is say, okay, well, what do you value? What do you value? And then who's funding what is important to you? And, a lot of times this is not on the front page of the paper. So we've got to look deeper to see who's funding my beliefs. If you really believe in third world economic development for women, well, let's say that's your passion. There are wealthy people that are putting a lot of money behind that vision and around that value, and really tuning into that helps you shift your feelings around, oh, all people are greedy and insensitive and feel superior, right? Because we want to really start feeling positive about money. If you believe that wealthy people are greedy, insensitive, and feel superior to other people, you'll never allow yourself to have wealth. Why would you allow yourself to become that which you despise, right? So it's really important to look actively for really positive role models and people that are doing things that you respect and love around money.
I love that. That is such great advice. And I've not heard that before at all. And that makes so much sense, because I know I was raised, God rest her soul. I love my mom. But she really did have negative views around, rich people. She was a union worker, and her brother wasn't an entrepreneur that she did not get along with, and frankly thought she was, he was cheating her out of, the inheritance from their mother and things like that. And so, listening to a lot of this stuff, and like I said, I have worked through a lot of this, and something that I teach is called the love method, which part of it is the O in love is open your heart to receive, and the importance of being able to do that. But there's still, it's ingrained, and I know that I have to continue to work on that, because it's still, just when I think I have it handled, it's like something will come up, and it's like, oh no, got to work on it a little bit more. And is that something maybe that you find when you're working with clients, that it's like that happens?
I love that it's so great the way that you just described that, because that's as real as it gets. I think that people have a misperception that if they work on, fill in the blank, let's just say their relationship to money, and they'll figure out, that's why I feel the way that I feel, and it'll heal and go away forever. But that's not who we are as humans. It's more the onion method. We unwrap layers and we heal layers, and then we come to another layer, and then we come to another layer. And life brings us many situations that allow us to look at, oh, what is coming up in me? I think that's a new thing for me to look at, address, heal, talk about. And we're complicated, right? It's very rare that I talk to someone, Grace, that has a boring money story. Right? It's very rare.
Wow.
I think we all wish we had a boring money story.
Yeah.
Everything went according to plan, and I had the perfect parents who taught me all about money, and now everything is proceeding just, right? I've never met that person, right? So we all have these crazy curveballs, and both good and bad. And so, part of it is claiming that and saying, yep, that's true. That's life. And I get to talk about it. I don't have to pretend that it didn't have an effect on me. It had a big effect on me, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm on the other side looking at that and healing. But we tend to put money in a funny box. We process fearlessly so many subjects.
Mm.
I know your listeners are well therapized, right? They have done copious amounts of wonderful, wonderful therapy. And money gets missed in the psychotherapeutic process. It is not well addressed in therapy, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is therapists have a very conflicted relationship themselves with money, and how I feel about charging people for helping them and so on and so forth, right? But we get to talk about this, and it's real, it's normal, and we're all trying to heal and up level and feel better and better and better, because ultimately we want money to be a sacred tool to live our best life and live out our values. And the more that we can process it, and I would also say the more that we can simplify it, because that's another piece of the puzzle. I think, Grace, people have complicated a lot of stuff around money that makes it harder to get clear about what we're talking about. And that's another piece.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of been talking a lot about sort of this negative impact. Well, let's flip it around a little bit and talk about abundance. And so how can we start maybe cultivating some different practices that could help us to start having this better relationship with money?
I love it. So here's what's fun about abundance that I always have to say. Abundance is both an inner state and an outer state. And you know that better than anyone, but sometimes people lose sight of that and they think abundance is only about the outer material world. The most important thing about abundance is this inner felt state of abundance. This is why gratitude practice is so important, and, feeling abundant on the inside, and eventually this expresses in various ways on the outside. But, in terms of abundance practices, I would offer 3. So one is, my vote is we find ways to beautify your money. And so I would start with beautifying your wallet. And that may sound funny. We're talking about spirituality and money, but if you beautify your wallet, I literally mean clean it out. Get rid of all of the garbage. How about have a wallet you love? How about have a wallet that's beautiful? If we're going to honor money and honor the flow of money in and out of our lives, a wallet is a symbol of that. And so you want to feel so warm and wonderful when you pull out your wallet. And you also don't want it crammed full of stuff, because it's a way of not honoring flow. And you want to honor flow, and a wallet is a symbol of that, right? I would add a second abundance practice, and that would be to simplify all of your accounts. Because what I know, Grace, as a money coach, is part of why people are in a lot of money fog is they have too many accounts. They have too many credit cards, too many checking accounts, too many savings accounts. There's a lot of reasons why this happens. But when you simplify your account structure, it's easier to really dig in and really start shifting your relationship to money. The more accounts you have, the more money fog you're likely in, and the more stress and anxiety you have around money. That's the correlation. You really want to simplify things.
Wow. All right. Well, that's 2. I think you said 3. Do you have one more, or was that 2?
Yeah, no, you're tracking. Yeah. So the third one I would throw in is going to, in some ways, may sound like the most practical. Well, I'd like to think they're all practical and doable, right?
Yeah.
But I would call it the good old reoccurring expense cleanup. Dun, 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 dun. So, when I start working with people, we go into different levels. There's the emotional level and the practical level, and, all sorts of stuff around money coaching. But at some point, we actually look at, where is your money going? And a lot of times we see things that we've just gone blind to, forgotten about, and there's a lot of money leaks. And here we are wanting to up level around money and feel great around money. And so for a while, it just takes a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of housekeeping. So listing out all of the things in your bank account and your credit card that are automatically pulling money every month. And it's a long list sometimes. It's, when I signed up for Audible, and when I signed up for Pandora, and when I signed up for Dropbox, and there's what the diet apps and stuff like that. Keep them if you're using them, of course, but how many of us have subscriptions online subscriptions that we're not using. And so it just creates this financial clutter, financial drain. It creates it's almost like another layer of anxiety. And so, dedicating 2 to 3 weeks to close those goes a long way towards beautifying your money.
Mm. Yeah, it is amazing how these things add up. And I would also encourage folks out there, because especially entrepreneurs out there, there's so many wonderful tools out there that are these AI softwares now. And oh, you want to be able to get the paid version because you get a lot more bells and whistles with it. But then if you're spending, this much on Claude, and then you're spending that much on ChatGPT, and then you're spending this much on this one and that one, that $20 a month starts adding up to a lot. So you need to really, when you're doing this house cleaning, and I would say not only maybe your personal, but also look at your business accounts as well, and see where there's something that maybe you can say, okay, am I really using this much, or can I maybe get by with a free one and let it go?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up business, because about a third of my practice are business owners. Actually, it might be even half. And like you, I have a lot of psychotherapists as clients, and lawyers, and I mean, just all sorts of different people in
Right.
private practice. And all of this applies to the business side of life as well as the
Yeah.
personal, too many accounts and the clutter. And
Yeah.
I love this idea of beautify your money.
Me too.
Beautify your money. So you just yeah, exactly. You go into your online accounts and and it just feels clean and clear. And it is seriously correlated to feeling more peaceful around money. And that is where we're really moving into that spiritual connection around money.
Which just brings me to something that, when you're talking about this beautifying, and I wonder if this is also something that, and I know I wanted to ask you this other thing, but I'm just struck with, especially, and I don't know what your breakdown with clients, male versus female, but I wonder if also some of our hang up around money is because maybe it has more of a masculine energy to it. And we want to be more feminine, and we want to be giving. And so that's where maybe we get this little stress, I guess, around it. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. I happen to specialize in working with women. So yep, you are singing my song. I mean, I do have some lovely, lovely male clients. I do, but I specialize in working with women, and money is often seen as masculine, and it is seen as a tool of power and control. And women are really in need of healing their relationship to power, because we tend to see it as negative, as bad, as power over. But as business owners, we actually need a lot of power. We need power to see our vision made manifest in the world, right? We need, like, if you asked Mother Teresa, I know she's not with us anymore, but she would score very high as on a mini personality type of quiz of money is power, because money, we need power to have our vision come forth in the world. But because we see it, like you were bringing up, as a tool of aggression, a tool of power, a tool of masculine, all that stuff. It's one more reason why we don't see money as very spiritual. And this is something that we want to shift.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because it's just really started to occur to me, and I'm thinking that is also maybe some of what I have not unpacked yet for myself, and that I want to start looking at, truly. And now I want to continue down the spiritual path, because I do know, especially for those out there listening and watching, who really get into this and maybe start talking about goddess energy. You know something about this. So I know there's a goddess called Lakshmi that I think has, and in fact I've even seen, I think, YouTube videos and things about listening to, I don't know, chants or something. So what does the goddess Lakshmi have to do with money?
So in fact, maybe they were my YouTube videos, although I don't think I did one on chanting, but I definitely, this is one of my favorite subjects. So my spirituality is definitely through Raja Yoga, right? So I am a daily meditator, and I'm very much in the path of yoga, if you will, the path of meditation. And in the Indian tradition, East India, there are many, many wonderful gods and goddesses, and they're all representations of one God. I know it's strange sometimes for Westerners that have a very different monotheistic notion of God, but they all are about the same one God. And so the goddess Lakshmi is the goddess of abundance and goddess of wealth. But again, abundance and wealth in many, many ways besides just money, right? I mean, she was the form of God that people would pray to for millennia to have healthy children and plentiful crops and good fortune in their life, right? So she's this super, super powerful, powerful energy that brings so much of this wonderful forms of abundance into our life. And when you look at the stories around Lakshmi and all these, wonderful mythology and just wonderful, wonderful stories, Lakshmi loves beauty and she loves order. And so there's this wonderful particular story where she is trying to give basically what we'd call money, trying to give money to this very, very poor couple that was desperately in need of a little bit of wealth in their life to help them with some issues they were having. And so she enters their house trying to give them money, and she doesn't want to put the money down in a dirty place. And she can't find a clean place in their house in which to leave them this gift because everything is just so cluttered. So she finally finds one edge of the stove that's kind of clean, and then she, as she kind of comes down for her great goddessness and cleans the rest of it with, the mantle of her hem and cleans this part of the stove, and that's where she leaves this amazing gift for them because she loves them so much, So it's fun to work with goddess energy. It's fun to work with a lot of the fascinating mythologies that are out there. There is a version of a goddess of abundance in all of the mythologies, and maybe not all the mythologies, but in Norse mythology and in so many, in the Greeks, the Romans. It's wonderful to go into both just feminine energy, is again, know better than anyone, and claiming that and owning that is just so delicious. And then to combine that with money and abundance is just really powerful. And I personally find that it's healing because, Lakshmi calls for us to be balanced around giving and receiving and to value ourselves. And that's hugely important.
Absolutely. And I just want to also let folks know that, again, and this goes back to Western tradition and Western religion, and that there's a lot of, I think especially among Christians that it's, that you have to have this, we talked about this noble poverty and thing, and that you're, it's better to give than receive. However, if I went to, I took a course called Prosperity for You that was written by a Unity minister, and where she goes through and finds all the wonderful parts in the Bible where talk about abundance and that it is good to have abundance and that God frankly wants us to be abundant. God doesn't want us to be, starving and poor and all this stuff that somehow has gotten into the zeitgeist that doesn't belong there.
It's so true. I mean, I was raised, I consider myself an expanded Catholic, right? So I was raised very, very, I didn't know anyone that wasn't Catholic until I went to college, right? And so then I added on this yoga spirituality on top of my Catholicism. So, who knows what all that says about me. But you're right. And there's, there's these very classic biblical misquotes that says, money is the root of all evil. And for all of your beautiful Christian listeners, they know that's a misquote. It's love of money over pursuit of money, money out of balance and our lives drive. That is the root of all evil. Right. So it's really so good to be able to look at that because, God in the Judeo-Christian model, 100% wants us to have abundance in all of these, wonderful ways and have this healthy relationship to, this energy, this resource of money.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, especially if you do look at it as, how what your values are. If you value being generous to people and that you want to be able to do good in the world, then just think how much more good in the world you could do if you had more money to do it with. You know,
Right.
you take care of
Exactly.
yourself and then you can generously share it with others.
Exactly. How many of us would love to step deeper and deeper into being a philanthropist?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we want to have greater levels of wealth so that we can put our money where we truly value and help the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking even for myself, it's like I think well, number one, I want to go back to your idea of looking for role models and then maybe put like, little stickers around me, think like this person, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I can start, getting that into my head that it's okay. It's okay to be wealthy because look at the great good that this person is doing. And I could do that too.
It's so true, and I've have a wide variety of clients, and some of my clients come from significant wealth. Some do and some don't. Some have a lot of money, some don't. But for my clients that have wealth and they want to really feel like they are increasingly a good steward of their wealth, I always encourage them to join a women's philanthropy group because having money can be very isolating, Grace. People are afraid to share with their friends that they have money. They feel like everyone thinks, oh, if only I had your problems. I mean, it's different for all of us, right? But you want to be, again, with models of other women that are very clean around their money, that can talk about it, that want to talk about their values around money, that are giving money where they where they want to give, and they want to be in fellowship with other women around this. So there's lots of ways to get into this, and we all want to heal our relationship to money, whether regardless of how much we have.
Yeah. Oh, so awesome. All right, I'm going to shift gears just slightly here because we're running out of time. But I like asking my guests this. So, what are you curious about right now?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I'm like, so many things. I'm like the most curious person on the planet. That just like question made my brain explode. Yeah. What am I curious about? Oh my goodness. I'm curious about so many things. This is a total non sequitur, Grace, but I've been doing a lot of work on healing stage fright and visibility issues, and so I'm most curious about all things related to being more and more visible in the world, and how to achieve that and be more comfortable being visible. And honestly, part of it's coming from the fact that, as I shared with you, I'm a tango dancer. So when I'm not money coaching by day, I dance by night. And I'm struggling with stage fright. And it's funny because I do so much speaking, Grace. I'm not, put me in front of 1,000 people, no problem. Let's talk about money, no problem. But put me in my high heel tango shoes and put me on a stage in front of a group, my legs shake. And so I am very curious about how to heal that and how to keep moving into that and how to just become more and more embodied in my own body and my own journey around visibility as I've, become more and more visible, obviously in my career. But why does that have to stop at the door of my personal life? And so that's what I'm curious about right now.
Well, as a former dancer when I was a kid, well, and even up through college, I still did ballet, tap, jazz, all that good stuff. I will tell you, you're always going to feel a little bit nervous when you get out there, but if you truly love it, just keep doing it, and it will get easier. But you got to just keep doing it and I'm sure you probably learned that through public speaking. I bet you were super nervous the first time you had to go out in front of a crowd too, right?
It's true. No, you're totally right. And I mean, I think it's getting easier, but I never, but then I push it to a new level, right? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, my husband and we're both tango dancers, and we're looking at competing nationally next year. And it's just a different level of visibility, right? I'm like,
sure,
so I know you're right. I know you're right. But that's what I'm most curious about, is this like visibility that also I'm not going to say transcends the body, but it's one thing to be visible in the mind and the intellect. And, I'm a writer and I'm a speaker, but to embody visibility is for me, my leading edge. And that's where my curiosity is.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and as you said, your husband is your dance partner. So I would think, lean on him and just, focus in on the fact that you both are loving what you're doing, and then see if you can tune out the audience.
Oh yeah, working on it. Yeah, I probably put
You'll get
bruises
there.
on that man's arms. I'm gripping tight so hard, so tight sometimes, But yeah, it is a super wonderful and high and holy thing to do in a relationship. So
I
it's
love it. I
wonderful.
love it.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you. I look forward to seeing your name, down the road here as being one of those champion tango dancers.
Yeah. I'll send you the video. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
Yeah.
Now we've talked about so much, and it's been amazing, and might even have to have you back again one day. But in the meantime, for those who have been listening and watching and are like, "Ooh, I really want to find out more about her and maybe work with her or something," so how can people contact you and get in touch with you?
Thank you for asking that. The best way would be to go to seattlemoneycoach.com, seattlemoneycoach.com. I've got amazing clients all over the country, but obviously I happen to live in Seattle. So what I would do is I would either grab a free discovery call if people just want to chat with me for a couple of minutes. And I love writing. There's a wonderful newsletter called Conscious Money that in a wonderful community that I have behind it for people that want to just get a hit of inspiration on some of the stuff that you and I are exploring today. If they want to, I don't think I send it out, Grace, more than probably once a month, but people really enjoy it. So I would subscribe. It's all in Seattle Money Coach.
All right. Very good. Well, I'll be sure and have that in the show notes for those of you listening. So be sure and check that out and take Mikelann up on that. So thank you so much. Oh, you know what though? I want to ask you one last thing. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that I should have? Any other one last point to leave our audience real quick with?
No, I think we hit it all. I mean, I just want to
Okay.
encourage people to know that it's a journey and it is possible to rise above the money fog, and it is possible to feel more and more in control of your money. And so I say it's very exciting.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you again for being with us. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank all of you for listening and for watching today. And I hope you've received as much value out of it as I did. And I hope you've got a couple different things. Maybe you jotted down some notes about some action steps that you're going to take. And if you want to share them with me, I would love for you to do that. And in fact, we've got a place for you to do that, actually, which is we've got a community called the Live, Love, Engage podcast community. Go to liveloveengage.com and you can join us. And I'd love to hear what you had to think about this today and share, like I said, what action steps are you going to take? Because I know what I'm going to do. So until next time, I want to encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.